The secret to being a great communicator isn't always what you say, but rather when you choose to stay silent. Today, we're going to talk about the power of silence and how it might be your superpower that you didn't even know you had. Hi, I'm Karin Reed. I'm a four-time author, Emmy Award-winning broadcast journalist, and communication expert on helping people to own the room, whether it be a physical one or a virtual one. Welcome to Speaker Dynamics. Welcome back, everybody. I am so delighted to restart Speaker Dynamics Own the Room. We are talking about the power of silence today, which I think is pretty appropriate because we have been silent for a couple of months. I have had a really big project that we've been working on at Speaker Dynamics, and it's been something that's required me to give it my full attention. But it's also been an interesting time for me because I've had an opportunity to observe some things that I normally wouldn't be as attuned to. And it's given me a whole bunch of ideas on things that we can explore together right here on the podcast. So I look forward to sharing them all with you. So today we're going to start off by talking about this idea of silence. And I'm going to share a couple of examples of how I've seen it used in a very strategic way and often unexpected way by various people throughout my past several months of work that I've been taking on. So let's start with the first one. I'm going to give you three examples because, I love the rule of three. So the first one is using silence to form your thoughts. So I like to call this pause to ponder. And I usually talk about this when I'm doing things like media training, where a reporter asks you a question and you might feel this urge to immediately start talking because you don't want to have any space in between. You don't want them to think that you don't know what you're talking about. And sometimes it just feels more comfortable to fill in that silence. But oftentimes that can get you in trouble. So I saw somebody pause to ponder in a very unexpected way. And let me kind of set the scene for you. So I was actually working at a huge conference for a client, and I was providing support for their main stage speakers. And they had brought in this big name speaker who I will not say the name of. Maybe you'll piece it together, some of you who were perhaps at the conference and noticed it as well. But this person was brought in to do a fireside chat with one of the executives from the company. And she is very highly regarded and should be. She's an excellent speaker and has appeared on the biggest stages that you can imagine. And what I found really interesting is this was supposed to be a very conversational, free-flowing event. It was a fireside chat. It was not a keynote speech. And what I found is that sometimes that free flow came to an abrupt halt. And it happened after this person was asked a question. So as mentioned, a lot of us would just automatically jump in and start talking because we felt like that's what we needed to do. But she actually took the time to hear the question and then sit in silence while she waited for the appropriate thought to come to mind and before she started talking, which I think is really interesting. So what happened was the impact of all this, like these pretty dramatic pauses. I mean, we're not talking about 2-second pauses. They were like, I would say probably maybe 5 to 10 seconds of pause, enough to make me feel a little bit uncomfortable, like, what's going on here? And for me to kind of look at some of my colleagues on either side of me to say, what is going on? But what happened was with these pauses that she created is it created more impact whenever she did start talking, because when she did speak, people were really prepared to listen. And they listened more intently, probably than they would have if she would have just immediately started talking like the majority of us tend to do. So what I thought about in that moment, as she had these very, I'm going to call them pregnant pauses that she did throughout the conversation, was she used silence to command attention. And I think it's interesting because silence often can be very loud. It was very loud in that moment. We all were like, this is a new approach, because honestly, all the fireside chats that I have seen, all the fireside chats that I have done over the course of my career have not had those pauses in them. But this person took the time to think about what she wanted to say and then began articulating it very eloquently. So back to that whole idea of, the absence of sound can be loud. So as a bit of, maybe TMI, I sleep with brown noise. It allows my brain to kind of shut off. And what I find is that right before my alarm goes off, the brown noise goes away. And oftentimes it's not the alarm that wakes me up, but rather the absence of the brown noise, the absence of sound that wakes me up first. And then, you have that moment of dread where you're like, oh, my alarm's going to go off. But it's almost like when you take that sound away, it sucks out, all the attention in the room, or maybe it draws more attention to what's going on in the room. And I think the same can almost be said whenever you insert that pause. You are preparing people to hear. You're building anticipation for what you're going to say. And it's a really effective tool. Now, using silence can be really hard to gather your thoughts, because a lot of us even want to use, our filler words, those those uhs, those so's, because gosh, we just don't want that silence to happen because it feels very uncomfortable to us. But what I thought was really demonstrated well by this particular speaker who was doing this fireside chat is she showed so much self-control. She showed that she was confident enough in her expertise and in what she was going to say, that she was going to allow people to wait for it. But also, I think to her, it was really important that she provided value with her answer, that she wasn't just, adding filler. She wanted to make sure that what she said was a value add for the audience and wasn't just filling space. And I think that that's a good lesson for all of us. That babble is not doing anyone any favors. So allow yourself the time to pause, to ponder, use that silence to gather your thoughts before you speak. All right. So that was example number one. Example number two was the ability to stop talking once you've made your point. So having silence at the other end, not before you speak, but after you're done, saying your piece, shutting up. It is really hard to do that sometimes. So I did a lot of media training this year all over the globe. I'm still continuing to do it. And it's been interesting. And I know it's unfair to paint everyone from a certain culture or a certain country with a broad brush. Everybody, obviously, they're individuals. But there are certain themes, some common themes that I've seen in certain geographies. So let me dig a little bit deeper into this media training that I do. So typically it's a full day session. I'll do a morning of teach, where I talk about best practices for navigating a media interview. And then in the afternoon, we switch and we put those techniques into practice, and we do application with mock interviews. So if you can imagine, at many of these events, I had people coming in from all over the globe. It wasn't just one country, wasn't just one geography. There are people who are flying in to do this full day media training. So we had people from all over the place who were all in one room for these mock interviews. Now, everybody had an opportunity to practice. And I had a list of questions. I didn't ask everybody every question, but usually there were certain questions that were repeated because the client wanted some alignment on messaging as well. So I asked people, these specific questions, and I got very different responses. They all contained the key messages that were asked of them, but the length of their answers were wildly different. We had some people who would give a 2-minute answer to a question. And then when I asked another person that same question, I had one person go, no. And that was their full answer. I'm like, all right. So the 2-minute answer and the 1-word answer, probably both need some tweaking, and we certainly talked about that. But I think it's very fascinating just to consider the range of answers and the length of them based upon global differences. But here's the thing, whenever you are, talking to reporters, being concise is really critical. You are always battling as a reporter, as a member of the media, something that I was for many, many years. You're always battling for space, on the page or on the website, or you're battling for length of time in a story. So if people can answer questions in a concise fashion, frankly, it makes your job easier. And if you make their job easier, it's going to be easier for you to go through the interview. So being concise is really important. But one of the skills that I often find most difficult for people to master in media training is to stop talking once they've answered the question sufficiently. And whenever you are, in a media interview, obviously it's important that you stop. You don't add on. But it's also important when you're in any sort of Q&A situation. So, think about if you're in a meeting with your leaders and they ask you a question, you might want to just give them as much information as possible because you're thinking, well, this will really demonstrate my knowledge and it'll, just give them more and more information and they'll feel satisfied. But usually less is more in those circumstances. Information overload is real and it muddies the message. And here's the real danger zone. The longer you talk, the more trouble you can potentially get yourself in. Because probably at the beginning you had something of value to say. Like you knew what you wanted to impart and you told them. Then you should have just stopped talking. But then we have a tendency to add on, almost like, well, we're going to convince you even more by reiterating our point multiple times. And then perhaps you veer into an area that you had not planned on talking to. So that's when you really get in trouble. That's honestly why reporters use the silent treatment sometimes. So instead of asking a follow-up question, what sometimes you can do is you'll ask a question, they'll respond, and then you're wanting them to say more. So rather than asking another question, you just kind of sit there and wait for them to continue to talk. And oftentimes, your interview subject will say something else. And sometimes it's a more interesting response than the one that they originally gave. So managing the silent treatment is a whole other discussion. But here's the thing. Whenever you are speaking, you want to make sure that you do answer the question sufficiently. But then you want to make sure that you stop and you allow that silence to sit there. You don't want to be so abrupt that people will think that you're rude. That, straight up no answer that I got. It wasn't rude, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. They needed to expand upon that to some degree. But you don't need to give them everything that is in your head. Because you're not doing yourself any favors. So remember, give your audience what they need, not everything you've got. So allow yourself to speak and then go silent and trust that you've actually done your job. All right. So example number 3 is something that I saw crop up more in my personal life than my professional life, but it's using silence to actively listen. So I teach the value of active listening and I teach the elements of active listening. I know how important it is to be fully present whenever you are in conversation with someone. You need to listen, physically, have your body language reflect that you are actually listening to them. You don't want to be sitting like this as they're talking to you over here. But you also want to make sure that you are mentally present and not dividing your attention. I teach this stuff, but honestly, I don't think I'm very good at it. And that's just full disclosure on my part, So just allow us to build the foundation for this. So active listening is not just passively hearing. In my view, active listening is intentionally working to truly hear and understand what the other person is saying and digesting it and not just having it wash over you. Now, there are times that I think that I am pretty good at it. And the times where I'd say I am good at being an active listener are, for example, when I'm teaching. That's when I have to be fully present. Because, for example, like say I'm doing a one-on-one coaching session or even doing Q&A in a workshop with multiple people. If somebody is telling me about their pain point, I want to make sure that I am fully attuned to what they are saying, and I'm digesting it so that I can give them the proper advice. If I'm not fully present in that moment and listening to what they're saying, I could be telling them to do something that is not applicable at all. So I do think whenever I'm teaching or whenever I'm coaching, I am pretty good at active listening. Another time when I think I'm pretty good at active listening is when I'm moderating a discussion. And this is a note for everyone who finds themselves in a position where they have to moderate a discussion. And that can be something where you're like up on stage and you're the moderator and you've like a panel that you are taking through a conversation. Or it could be if you're just moderating a meeting. Because if you're a meeting leader, in essence, oftentimes you are the moderator. And here's what's important to remember. In moderation, the most critical skill is not your ability to speak well, but rather your ability to listen well. Your job as a moderator is to orchestrate a robust discussion of the other people who are on the call or the other panelists who are there. It's not for you to hear the sound of your own voice over and over and over again. One of the biggest mistakes I see moderators make is they'll ask questions that are longer than any answer that has been given. And that's not fair to the audience because unless you're there as a panelist and there to provide expertise, you're there primarily to pull out the expertise of the other people who are sitting on the stage with you. So make sure that you focus on listening, because when you focus on listening as a moderator, here's what it allows you to do. It allows you to listen for connections. So you are able to say, oh, you know what? Actually, Bob, I know you said that a couple of minutes ago. Let's talk about how that applies to what, Jane just said. And those are just names I pulled out of my head. So they're kind of basic. Apologies. But it also allows you to ask some relevant follow-up questions. When I'm a moderator, I always think of myself as like the voice of the audience. So if somebody says something that I find interesting, I'm like, I bet the audience finds that interesting too. I'm going to ask a follow-up on that. Because my curiosity probably reflects the curiosity of the audience, and I'm going to dig a little bit deeper on that. And it also allows you to kind of draw segues between the conversations that are had on the stage. So say that you have, and I'm saying stage, but this, fits into all sorts of different scenarios. So say that you have somebody who has an opinion about one thing and they express it and you're like, I know this other person who is sitting right beside them has a different opinion. I'm going to link what this person said on the right hand side to what this person on the left hand side might think and try to draw that out. So that creates a really dynamic dialogue that makes for a more interesting conversation for everybody. So as a moderator, it is important to be an active listener so you can do all these skills well. Okay, so the times when I'm not good at being an active listener, which has become very apparent to me over the past couple months, is when I'm interacting with my spouse. Oftentimes I half listen. Maybe you have experienced this as well. So I've been shocked actually how many times my husband has said to me, I just told you that. I'm like, no, you did not. He's like, yeah, I just told you. And not only that, I told you and you responded to what I said. And I thought, oh my gosh, how is that even possible? But when I hear that I am so poor at listening to him, I realize just how annoying that must be. But it also is probably hurtful at times too. Like I'm not giving him the respect that he deserves. Now, full disclosure here, I will say that he does that to me as well. And, maybe it's a product of being together for decades, but still, it's not fair. It's not fair to either of us. So what I'm trying to be better at is using silence to be a more active listener. So that frankly, I can respond appropriately, or at least be aware that I am responding so that I remember it. And he doesn't say, I just told you that and you said yes or no. Like, I want to know what he is saying to me and how I've actually, reacted to it. So I have a challenge to all of you. Maybe pick a day, maybe even pick a conversation where you are going to be a more intentional, active listener, where you're going to be fully present. You're not going to let those pings, dings, and whooshes on your laptop draw your attention away. Maybe you flip over your phone and don't check out the notifications that are coming in, and allow yourself to be fully present, to be an active listener during that conversation. I can almost guarantee you that it's going to improve the quality of that conversation, and it'll allow you to focus on what they are saying, focusing on what you are hearing, rather than what you are about to say, because sometimes we have a tendency to do that too. We just shut off our ears in the middle of the conversation because we're thinking about how we're going to respond. So try to stay present during that conversation and give your conversation partner, whether it's your spouse or your coworker or a family member or a friend, the respect that they deserve, and they'll appreciate it as well. All right. So the big takeaway for today is silence is a powerful tool, and it's one that is often difficult to master. But learning how to lean in to that silence allows you to make a big difference in both your personal and professional lives. So let's all do this together. Let's all focus on allowing silence to happen before we speak, silence to happen when we are done expressing our thoughts in full, and also allowing silence to be a time where we focus on active listening and make us better communicators on that side of the communication equation. All right. So as per usual, there is some bonus content for today, and it's actually kind of an exciting thing. We're going to do a book giveaway, but there is a catch. It's not a total freebie. I need some of your thoughts to help me to improve a couple of things. So if you haven't heard, we actually launched a new website. That was one of the big projects that we were working on this summer in order to, really bring Speaker Dynamics in full to all of you. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And in addition, I also just want to know what topics you want me to tackle in this podcast. We have had significant uptake on the podcast, which is so exciting, but I want to make it as relevant as possible for you. So here's the deal. Please go to speakerdynamics.com/bonus content. Once again, it's speakerdynamics.com/bonus content. And there you will have an opportunity to click a form. And I want you to leave me two things. Tell me what you think about the podcast, not the podcast. Tell me what you think about the website, the new website, which is speakerdynamics.com. So just play around on it. Let me know what you think. Be very curious to hear your thoughts. So I'd like feedback on the new website. And also I would love to hear what topics you would like me to tackle. So if you can give me those two pieces of feedback, the first 10 people who respond on that form will get a book of their choice. In case you haven't heard, I've written 4, and you can check out the different ones that you have the choice of. If you go to speakerdynamics.com and you click on the books tab, and you'll see the 4 books there, and you can choose whichever one you want. And then when you do that, I will send it to you, and I will even sign it. So I appreciate it so much. So once again, I would love your feedback on the new website. I would love your topics that you would like me to tackle so that I can make this podcast about you. And the first 10 people to send me those 2 pieces of information will get one of my books. So go to speakerdynamics.com/bonus content, speakerdynamics.com/bonus content, and you'll have access to the form that will allow you to submit those 2 pieces of information. So thank you so much in advance for your help. And also thank you for listening to this episode today. Until next time, everybody.